Hello and welcome to episode 19 of Question and Answer. I am your host, Panyo Basa, sometimes known as David and strangely increasingly known as John because that's the name on my ID. I'm going to take a drink. And I apologize for taking so long to answer your questions or to answer other people's questions, but I've been just very busy lately because more than one third of the people at the place where I work all got sick at the same time. At least one of them, I think two of them hospitalized. And apparently it's a combination of the Chinese coronavirus and some kind of flu. And I think at least two people got both at the same time, which kind of reminds me of an Australian friend of mine in Burma who had malaria, TB, and what was the other one? Cholera. He had malaria, TB, and cholera all at the same time. So I've been working overtime and have been very busy and coming home tired and late. So it's taken me a while to finally get to these questions, but here I am, and I'm going to answer some questions. And so, without any further ado, the first question is from Julie. And this is a question, she asked this quite a while ago, but she asked the question in a place that isn't the usual place for asking questions. Like, I, before a Q&A, I'll go through and collect all the questions that people have asked um, under the most recent Q&A videos and also on the subscribe star page under the announcement for the next Q&A and also on the Discord channel. And if I remember correctly, she asked the question somewhere else. And so it just slipped through the cracks. I didn't answer it. But Julie asks me, what is my opinion of the Goenka system? And the Goenka system, it's like a stripped down, simplified version of Theravada. S.N. Goenka, who he was ethnically Indian, but he was born and raised in Burma, I'm pretty sure. And his main teacher was, oh, now I don't even remember his teacher, Uba Khin. Uba Khin was a Burmese Vipassana instructor. And so it's based on Burmese Theravada, but it's been modified quite a lot, very much simplified. And the main meditation technique in Goenka, the Goenka system, is a kind of vipassana, quote unquote, that involves sweeping through the body. It's like, um, I mean, I've never practiced it myself, but I've talked to quite a few people who have practiced it, and I have read a few of Goenka's books. And you're supposed to go through your body like sector by sector, and I mean, you're trying to experience some kind of sensation before moving on to the next part of your body, and then you try to experience some sensation and note it, and you move on to the next. So you're kind of sweeping through your body, noting whatever sensation is predominant. And there seems to be a certain amount of cult of personality involved also with regard to Goenka himself. Um, so I mean, it's got its strengths and its weaknesses. It's got its good points and its bad points. With regard to the bad points, I would say partly it is really a stripped down and very simplified version of Theravada Buddhism. And also, I have noticed in the past, and I've heard this from other people also, that dedicated Goenka practitioners often have a kind of Jehovah's Witness mindset where they just become fanatical or they just insist that the Goenka system is the one true Buddhism. And if anyone drops out of the Goenka system, they get shunned as though they have died, that sort of thing. So, I mean, that's not so good. But with regard to the good points or the strengths of the Goenka system, it is difficult. They put a lot of emphasis on commitment and meditating every day, keeping five precepts. If you want to do a retreat, I can't remember what they're called. It's called something besides a retreat. But if you want to do one that lasts more than 10 days, you have to, or so I've been told, You have to meditate at least 2 hours a day and keep 5 precepts for at least 2 years. And there's not a whole lot of people that are committed enough to do that in the West. And just because it is difficult, I mean, some people would consider that to be a negative aspect of the system, but when you accomplish something difficult, it makes you stronger, and it also gives you a sense of accomplishment, like you've really done something. And that's one reason why people can really get more or less fanatical about it, if they're not careful. And let's see, another good thing about the Goenka system is that it's one of the most successful forms of Theravada Buddhism in the West, and they don't charge money. They sort of indirectly do. They'll tell you at a retreat that if you donate to the system, donate to the retreat center or whatever, it's not for yourself. It's just allowing somebody after you to attend a retreat. So if you feel like you got benefit, if you feel like it's worthwhile to do it, then you're helping somebody else to do it by contributing. And apparently that approach has been very successful, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Goenka centers around the world. And so it is a good way of getting Dhamma out to the masses. Lots and lots of people, not all Buddhists, have done Goenka retreats, and it has been helpful to people. It's often a kind of stepping stone towards becoming a monk for a lot of men, possibly a stepping stone for becoming a nun for a lot of women also, where they want something deeper. You know, you get sort of the stripped down elementary version of Buddhism, and after you've gotten benefit from that, you want something deeper that goes farther. So the Goenka method has led a lot of people towards more orthodox monastic Theravada Buddhism. So all in all, I say it's definitely more good than bad. It is somewhat stripped down and elementary, and there is kind of a Jehovah's Witness-ish attitude towards it with a lot of people. But all in all, it's a good system. And so I'll just move on to the next question. And the next question is from Daniel. And Daniel asks, let's see here, what is the classification of mental states related to jhanas? So, I mean, it's with regard to jhana, there is a stereotyped, standard, stock explanation of jhana, which describes the mental states. And just about every single time jhana is mentioned in the suttas, it's the same stock formula. So I may as well just read it. So I'm going to read it out of Jnanatiloka's Buddhist dictionary here. Under the heading of jhana. And so this is just straight out of the text. It's from any number of Pali texts, any number of suttas. Detached from sensual objects, O monks, detached from unwholesome states of mind, the monk enters into the first absorption, or the first jhana, which is accompanied by thought and discursive thinking, is born of detachment, and is filled with rapture and joy. So that's the first jhana. It's based on detaching yourself from sensual pleasures, unwholesome thoughts, and our unwholesome mental states. And there's still thinking, there's still physical pleasure and pain, and also mental pleasure and pain. So second jhana, again, stock phrase here, or stock explanation. After the subsiding of thoughts and discursive thinking, and by gaining inner tranquility and oneness of mind, he enters into a state free from thought conception and discursive thinking, the second absorption, which is born of concentration and filled with rapture and joy. So the second jhana, you've moved on from the first jhana, and the main difference is you're just not thinking anymore. You know, the thought process has stopped. You might start having a little bit of a thought arise, and it just fades back out again. You don't have your thoughts hooked up into a sequence. You know, a thought can arise unbidden, but you're not just going to run with it. You know, it's not just going to start leading you astray. It just arises and passes away, and then you're back at no thinking again. So the third jhana is as follows. After the fading away of rapture, he dwells in equanimity, mindful, clearly conscious, and he experiences in his person that feeling of which the noble ones say, happy lives the man of equanimity and attentive mind. Thus he enters the third absorption. So the third jhana is based more on mindfulness, and mental happiness and unhappiness have faded away. So you're still capable of experiencing pleasure and pain in your body, but you're not thinking anymore. You're not having emotional ups and downs, and your mind is becoming unified. Or here it has, what is it, singleness of mind? Is that the way he says it? Yeah. Oh, oneness of mind. Okay, so then finally, fourth jhana is as follows. After having given up pleasure and pain, and through the disappearance of previous joy and grief, he enters into a state beyond pleasure and pain, into the fourth absorption, which is purified by equanimity and mindfulness. So the fourth jhana is like purity of concentration, purity of equanimity, purity of mindfulness, and no more pleasure and pain, no more thinking. And that would be the essential mental states of jhana. And if that's not precise enough, I'm sorry, because that is the stock explanation. You might be able to pick up a little more detail from a book like the Visuddhimagga, or any number of books by someone like Bhikkhu Bodhi, who are going into further details, but the further details are more commentarial and a certain amount of conjecture, I think, or just going with the dogma of what got cooked up by like medieval Sri Lankan monks. So I'll just move on to Daniel's next question, which is, does doing bad stuff without bad mental states affect karma? And there's a few questions along these lines that will follow this one. But doing bad stuff without bad mental states, technically, according to Buddhism, there is no bad stuff without bad mental states. I mean, you can't do something bad without bad mental states, because the mental states determine whether it's good or bad. So I guess the answer to that one would be no. Does doing bad stuff without bad mental states affect karma? Yeah, or you could just say that it's kind of a trick question, because whether an action is good or bad depends on the accompanying mental states and not the action itself. And I'll be getting back to this because there are at least two more questions along these same lines. So I'll just move on to the last question by Daniel. Is the final mental state before death the most important? Why and how much? Yeah, I mean, usually for most people, or most beings even, you could say the final mental state before death is the most important, because it determines like your trajectory or your heading, what bearing you're going to have into your next life. So it's like the last mental state you have before you die is like the jumping off point to your next existence. And so if you have like a positive mental state when you're dying, or a moral, wholesome mental state when you're dying, it's going to help you move in a wholesome or moral direction into your next existence. It's not going to totally determine what your next existence is going to be like. I mean, you could be a really bad person, and you just have like a real epiphany when you're dying. Just you're in like this expanded mental state. Everything's blissful and beautiful, and so it can cause you to have a rebirth. Let's say into a rich, healthy, prosperous family. But then you're still going to have all this karmic junk from the bad life that you lived that's going to mess that up. Or alternatively, you can be like a virtuous person, a wise person, and then you have like a really bad mental state when you're dying. Maybe you're in a lot of pain. You're just kind of, you just break down. You just like your equanimity breaks down and so forth, and so you wind up in a bad rebirth. But still, you're going to have all this wholesome karma that kind of lifts that up and makes it not so bad, or maybe even in some ways shortens it so that you're able to move on to a better life after that. So Buddhists and Hindus, a lot of them will say that life is really just a preparation for death. I often point out that Mahatma Gandhi, when he got shot and was dying, as he's falling to the ground, he said, "Hey Ram," and it wasn't like, "Oh God, they got me," like in the movie. It was he wanted his mind focused on God as he died because, you know, he wanted to be close to God. You know, whatever happens after death, he wanted to be moving in the direction of God. So, yeah, you can say that it is the most important moment of your life, is your death, the moment of death. And so I'll just move on to the next question from, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. It's spelled Tyr. So that's Tyr or Tyre. And he asked two questions in two different places. And one of these questions, I think, already got answered by somebody else. He asked it in a comment section somewhere about, let's see, you mentioned 3 or 4 books to have a good idea of what Buddhism is and what it is not. Can you mention those again with preferred publishers, spelling, etc.? I think somebody already answered that, and I'm not even sure what video. I've got this written down. I'm not sure what video it's even referring to. If you know something about Buddhism already, then possibly one of the best books you can get is Studies in the Origins of Buddhism by G.C. Pandey. And that's published by Motilal Banarsidass. I may have also mentioned What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Rahula. I don't know what the publisher is. I don't have a copy of it on hand. Bhikkhu Bodhi's and Nyanamoli's translation of the Majjhima Nikaya is also really good. It gives you a really orthodox, straightforward exposure to like ancient Indian monastic Buddhism. If you can find a good translation of the Sutta Nipata, my translation of the Atthakavagga, which is available on the nipapancha.org website. That would be a good introduction. But I think somebody already answered it, so I'll just move on. And if you really want to know if Tyr or Tyre wants me to go into more details, I can do that. But like I say, I think somebody already answered the question for me, so I'm just moving on. So his next question: can you describe your states of mind after meditation practice as a monk? I am certain that my meditations are beneficial, but as a monk, I would imagine your experiences would be exponentially so. On that note, I was practicing several hours a day at one time with results. Sometimes my mood become, as odd as it sounds, almost too happy, and throughout the day would find my mood elevating completely on its own for no apparent reason. I had no motivation to complete my regular work. I found I had to scale back my practice. It seems meditation and serious enlightenment would not mix well with mundane life. To be clear, I am in no way claiming enlightenment, but would want to continue practice. Any thoughts on this? Well, it's kind of hard to describe the states of mind after meditation practice. Like when I was meditating intensively, I'm pretty sure my first 10 years as a monk, I was probably averaging about 6 hours a day of formal sitting practice, not including walking practice. Mainly it causes your mind to be quieter and clearer, more focused, less distracted. That would be like the main benefits. You're less likely to get carried away by negative mental states. If you do get irritated or annoyed, you tend to be mindful of it, which deprives it of a lot of its power. People that are mindful a lot and you're not usually angry, when you do become angry, it's just like sirens and flashing lights. It's really noticeable, and it's very easy to be mindful of it. So those are benefits. It helps you to be detached from samsara to some degree. With regard to this middle part about how you were becoming too happy, I knew this guy. He was a really good guy. He owned a construction company, and it was his ambition to renounce the world and become a monk. And unfortunately, it was also his ambition to be a monk for about 5 years until he became a Sotapanna, then drop out and become a teacher at some place like IMS. Um, but he had this problem in that he would experience too much piti. And I already mentioned piti is one of the factors of involved in jhana. You have piti up until second second jhana. With third jhana, you no longer experience it. Um, but it's a kind of mental exhilaration or enthusiasm. And he would just get drunk on it. If he was doing intensive meditation, everything would just be hilariously funny. And so he wound up renouncing the world. He got rid of all of his business. He went to Burma, was ordained at a monastery there, and he was just getting drunk on meditation. He was just like laughing uproariously and just like dancing around and just acting silly until finally he was required to drop out. It's like his teacher told him, "You got to go back to America because this isn't working." And that was unfortunate because he really was a good guy. Let's see, what's the last part here? With regard to meditation interfering with worldly life, that's not necessarily the case. Like I already mentioned, Uba Kin, who was the teacher of S.N. Goenka, and he was a kind of meditation master, I'm pretty sure. But he was also like a government minister. He was a relatively high-ranking bureaucrat in the Burmese government, and I mean, he wasn't like a military goon or anything, but he was a conscientious, like a government servant and a busy man apparently, but still he was able to be a meditation master at the same time. I assume it would depend on what kind of meditation you're doing. Like if you're doing samatha meditation, like based on samadhi, where you're just like silencing and stilling your mind to just, just crystal clarity and silence, something like that, then yeah, that could interfere with functioning normally in everyday life. But if you're doing mindfulness meditation, where you're just meditating on whatever arises, like when I'm at work at a sheet metal shop, just some of the repetitive actions of like feeding sheet metal through a machine or something like that can become meditative. Just walking can be a meditation. Even talking can be a kind of mindfulness meditation. So it's not necessarily the case that intensive meditation can is incompatible with worldly life. With some kinds, worldly life is more of a limiting factor on how deeply you can meditate than vice versa. Like with regard to samatha meditation, if you're really going for jhana, like I was mentioning above, um, yeah, just all the distractions of worldly life, it's not very conducive to that. Maybe some people who are very adept or very talented, you just have like an inborn talent at meditation, and there are some people like that. Maybe they can swing it, but one of the main reasons for renouncing the world as a monk to begin with is to simplify things so that your mind isn't so distracted and you can meditate more easily. And that's particularly true with regard to like samadhi based meditations. So I think I'll move on. The next question is from Reconciliation. And Reconciliation says, tell us about your father's stories of World War II and if they involve things like seances. Okay, well, my father, most of his stories about World War II were not like spiritual or occult or anything like that. He uh, he was a combat medic. He had some kind of gory stories about really badly messed up soldiers that he was attending to. Like having to amputate a leg with scissors and this kind of thing, removing broken teeth with pliers, that kind of thing, which he didn't like talking about. And as a kid, he especially didn't like talking about a lot. I mean, when I was a kid, he didn't like talking about it a lot. He didn't like remembering it much. Um, he was a prisoner of war. He was captured by Hungarian soldiers wearing German uniforms during the invasion of Europe, after D-Day. He was on Normandy Beach also. One of the main stories of Normandy Beach was when you came in, you had to run over just this it was like there were like corpses that were just drifted up on the beach. There was like this line of corpses, like 3 or 4 deep, and you had to run over the tops of them. And it bugged him because he thought some of them might still be alive. And the first medic station that he set up was in a pillbox that had been cleared of Germans, and it smelled of like flamethrower, napalm, and burnt flesh, that kind of a thing. So he had some pretty gnarly stories. But the closest thing to sort of a seance story he had with regard to World War II is that before the war started, he was an X-ray technician at Fort Bragg, I think is in North Carolina, and I think it was called Camp Bragg back then. And he was studying hypnosis, and he thought it was really interesting just how hypnosis can be used as an anesthetic, how you can use it, as a, you can even operate on people if they're in a deep hypnotic trance. And so when he was in Europe during World War II, he was called the voodoo medic because he was using hypnosis as a way of alleviating pain, alleviating blood loss. He found out that a wounded soldier who's in shock, is essentially in a kind of trance state. And so you can tell them you won't feel the pain, or you're going to constrict the blood vessels in your arm to reduce the blood loss and this sort of thing. And it actually worked, although a lot of materialistic people or normie Christian people just considered it to be like voodoo magic and bullshit or something. But that was about as close to occult stuff that he was doing that young. He was in his early 20s during World War II and didn't really get into seances and so forth until later in life. So I'll just move on to the next question, which is from Scout. He's got 2 questions here. Scout's first question is, would you consider taking a Vajrayana initiation from a tantric guru? And ordinarily the answer would be no. I've kind of had enough of initiations from gurus, unless I were to find someone who really I consider to be enlightened, or someone who was really, obviously much wiser than me. And yeah, I mean, that might inspire me to try to learn more from them. So if they were like a tantric Vajrayana guru or something, that might inspire me to want to learn more about tantric Vajrayana. But that would be about it. I'm really not in the market for going out in search of getting like green Tara empowerments or anything like that. My path is somewhat different nowadays. I'm reconciling spirituality with everyday life, or the everyday life of a person living in America and essentially paying bills. So the next question from Scout, also, can you see the veracity of the argument as to why the tantric vehicle of Buddhism is considered the superior and quicker path, as well as being the one which is reserved for practitioners with the sharpest faculties and intellect? I can hazard a guess as to your response, but I was just wondering if you could see the rationale behind this claim. Yeah, to some degree, I can see the rationale behind the claim. I think for some people, a tantric approach is the best approach, possibly the only realistic approach. Most most people just, I mean, they just cannot renounce the world and be celibate for the rest of their life. And so, tantra in that case, um, it can still be effective. And for some people, it just may work the best because it is a higher difficulty setting. So, it's like with a higher difficulty setting, it's more challenging, and some people really rise to the challenge. I've been like that, where, when I was in school, the more difficult the class, usually the better I was because it challenged me and it caused me to try harder. Whereas an easy class was just kind of boring, and I wouldn't try as hard as I could. So there could be some of that involved in tantra also, where it's just it's sink or swim to a greater degree than being a renunciant living alone in a cave somewhere. Let's see what else he has here. The superior and quicker path. Well, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say that that is true in an unqualified manner. I think the Buddha was a very wise man, and I think, well, obviously, to a Buddhist anyway, and I really think that he set up a system that maximized your chances of becoming enlightened, at least for the maximum number of people. And if you know, tantric practice was superior to meditating alone in a forest, then I think there's a good chance he would have taught that instead. But for some people, yeah, the tantric path is better, I would assume. So I'll just leave it at that and move on to the next question from Rakasa. And also there is some Chinese-looking ideograms after the name, which I do not know how to pronounce. So we'll just go with Rakasa. And Rakasa says, the Buddha taught that all things other than those who attain Nibbana are subject to age, death, and rebirth. It is plain how this applies to animals, humans, demons, angels, etc. I have a hard time understanding how this applies to the higher planes of existence. Can you explain how death and rebirth operate on the planes of form and no form? How, for example, would the platonic form of a triangle die and be reborn? Okay, so first of all, I would just point out towards the beginning here, he says that all things other than those who attain Nibbana are subject to age, death, and rebirth. I would say even those who do attain Nibbana, like an enlightened being, are still subject to age and death, at least from an objective point of view. From the point of view of an objective observer, even the Buddha got older and got sick and died, even though he was fully enlightened. But he didn't attain rebirth, supposedly. I mean, that's the official doctrine, that once you become fully enlightened, you are not born again. So I'll move on. And it seems that Rakasa here does not understand what the realms of form are. For example, he seems to be conflating the Rupa Loka in Buddhism, the realm of form, with Plato's heaven of forms. And it's just not the same. There is no equivalent of Platonic ideals or Platonic forms in Buddhism. So the realm of form of the Rupa Loka is the Brahma realm, where they're like devas, they're like gods. It's just that they're more advanced. They live longer. They're no longer differentiated into two genders. It's a very very subtle form of matter that they're composed of, and yeah, so they would die the same as most devas or small g gods would die. They just when their karma has exhausted itself after a zillion gajillion years, they become dimmer. You know, their luminescence or their glory becomes less, and then their friends realize that it's time for them to move on. So they circle around them, and they say goodbye and everything, and then the deva or the Brahma disappears from whatever heaven realm they're in and reappears in the next, according to their karma. So yeah, the like the perfect triangle in Plato's heaven, it's yeah, it's just irrelevant to the Buddhist realm of form. And it's similar with regard to the realm of no form, the Arupa Loka, which is the highest series of heaven realms in Buddhist cosmology, where the beings there are just pure mind. They don't have a physical body anymore. And it would be the same thing there. It's just after they've been there for countless zillions of years and their karma is exhausted, they just fade out there or just poof out of existence, and then their consciousness takes rebirth in a different realm. So yeah, there's no Platonic triangles in Buddhist heavens. So I think I'll just move on. And the next question is from MJL. And this is very fundamental. What are the worldly benefits of Buddhist practice? And I've kind of touched on that a little bit above, but I might as well say, let's see. First of all, there's keeping 5 precepts, just being a moral person and being generous, donating to good causes or supporting monks and nuns, that sort of thing. it helps you in various ways. First of all, you're making good karma. So in the future, good things are more likely to happen back to you. If you do good, good comes back to you. It's fairly simple. Also, generosity, especially, it cultivates selflessness. You know, it weakens the strength of your ego by you're having a feeling of us, of community, that sort of a thing. So there's that too, because the stronger your ego is, the less wise you are, essentially. Um, with regard to meditation practice, then it's like what I've already mentioned. It helps to detach you from samsara. You're not as stuck in samsara. You're less distracted. You're less likely to be on an emotional roller coaster ride. Or even if you are on an emotional roller coaster ride, you're less identified with it. You know, you can sort of step back a little bit and observe it as just nature taking its course. And it's not like, you know, I am happy, I am unhappy. It's just, you know, you are, you know, if you're anything at all, you're just like the observer of the happy and the unhappy, and it's just nature taking its course. And so it helps to detach you from the illusion. You know, you're getting one foot out of the matrix. It's like that. So you do good karma, and you know good things happen back to you more. Bad things happen to you less, and there's just an increased sense of peace and equanimity, and just detachment from all the bullshit. Those would be like the main benefits. There's other big ones I'm sure that I'm forgetting, but those would be the main ones from my point of view. And so I'll move on to the next question, which is from Yuichiro, I think. And Yuichiro, I think, says, I do think romantic love can be very good. How do you balance this inherent attachment of it with minimizing attachments? So that's a good question. Love is good. If there's any genuine love, it is good, even if it's mixed with all kinds of bad. Like somebody might genuinely love their heroin that they take, then at least the love part is good, even though the rest of it might be predominantly bad. And I said it before, I'll keep saying it, that love is attachment. That love is knocking down Pink Floyd's wall. You know, everyone's, or most people have got like this wall around their heart, so to speak. And in order to truly love somebody, you have to knock a hole in that wall so that there's no more differentiation or separation. You just sort of melt into an us. And it is true that romantic love notoriously is less stable than other kinds of love, like family love. Generally, people don't divorce their mother or that kind of a thing. And that's largely because romantic love is more conditional. You know, I'll love you so long as you keep treating me good, or I'll love you so long as you're faithful to me, or I'll love you, you know, so long as you still make X amount of money or whatever. And but it's a good start, and you can cultivate romantic love into a higher spiritual form of love. And it's simple. The way to explain it is just the more unconditional love is, the purer and more spiritual it is, and the closer it comes to God in the biblical sense of God is love. So find a person that you can love unconditionally, and then love them unconditionally, even if they're giving you a really bad time, or even if they gain 50 pounds or whatever, that you just love them anyway. You know all their strengths and weaknesses, you know all the bad things about them, and you just love them with all your heart anyway. And for some reason, I keep thinking of Dostoevsky's. It's considered to be his greatest novel, The Brothers Karamazov, where the spiritual brother, Alyosha Karamazov, he's encouraged by his guru, his starets, Father Zosima, to marry this girl named Lisa, who is just a total basket case. Not only is she neurotic as hell, but she's apparently demon possessed also. And that was supposed to be all right, this, my take on it is that was supposed to be part of Alyosha's spiritual practice. I mean, that was just learning how to love this person unconditionally, no matter what, no matter how horrible things got. That was strengthening his spirit. You know, it was purifying his soul and so forth. And I mean, that's really advanced practice. I think you're way better off finding someone that you genuinely consider to be a good match for you. You know, somebody that you really have just, you just hit it off. You just spontaneously, the feeling of us, you know, that you don't have to work really hard to get it going. You know, it just comes naturally. You just drawn to this person and love them as unconditionally as you can. Um, I've said before that probably the purest form of love that the average normie experiences would be a mother's love for her children because it's less conditional. A mother loves her children whether they're beautiful or ugly, whether they're good or bad, you know, whether they're brilliant or stupid. She loves them anyway. Sometimes the worst kids get the most love because the mother intuitively knows that they're the ones most in need of love. But still, it's even that is conditional because it's conditional on the fact that they are her children. But just any kind of love can be improved and purified into unconditional love. And romantic love is no exception. So I think I'll move on to Yuichiro's next question. Also, in response to the idea that if you have good intentions but do bad things, it's not a problem. If you had some hypothetical Mao like dictator who actually had good intentions but still killed millions of people, I really can't believe no bad karma is created by that. If the intentions are truly good, then it is the utopian delusion ideology he presumably believes in, which is generating the bad karma. I assume is creating. I assume, see, is created by killing millions of people for the greater good. Okay, so the main gist here is you try to do good and you wind up killing millions of people. That would be bad karma, and I think I explained the last time I was asked a question about this sort of thing that I mean the intention of doing good is good karma. And so let's say you have someone like Mao. I mean better than Mao. Let's say there's someone who implements this agricultural reform and the agricultural reform for whatever reason isn't working and people are starving. And like was the case with Mao, what I've read, it's just that everyone was afraid to tell him that it wasn't working, and so he didn't even know until after the fact. So in a case like that, unless there's some kind of subconscious like telepathy or empathy where you're picking up on the suffering of these people, then really you're not doing anything wrong. It's sort of like you have a good king who's got a bad minister who's doing bad things behind his back. The good king, you know, there might be some indirect bad karma from just being gullible and stupid enough to trust a bad person, you know, a certain amount of delusion. But mostly the badness is the people who are deliberately doing bad stuff and not the person who's trying to do good stuff and failing. A good example would be, let's say a doctor is trying to save somebody and they just fail, you know, they do the emergency operation and the person dies anyway. Then he really hasn't done anything bad. Or it's like the Stephen King novel, The Stand, which is good to read for anybody who's interested in like mm, genetically engineered viruses getting escaping from laboratories. He's trying to save somebody by doing an emergency appendectomy. He's not a doctor. He doesn't know how to do it, but he's doing his best to save this person, and the person dies during the operation. Well, I mean, the guy Stu, I can't remember his last name, East Texas. I mean, he hasn't really done bad karma by failing to save this person. The person died largely because of the botched operation, but the guy did the best he could. He was really trying to help, and so he probably got more good karma than bad. And you can say with regard to the Mao-like dictator who has good intentions and millions of people die, it's going to be a mix of good and bad. And most of the bad karma he gets, assuming that he gets it, is probably after he realizes that millions of people died, and then there can be like the guilt and remorse, which is going to cause most of the bad karma. Just the awareness that he killed millions of people and he's just like torn up over it and just kicking himself for the rest of his life, that would be where most of the bad karma would come from. Not just from the mere fact that he was trying to do the right thing and made the wrong choice and millions of people died. So, I mean, a lot of people really do not grok Buddhist ethics, where people in the West are really stuck in a kind of Western utilitarian ethic where something is good if it causes increased happiness of the most number of people. Something is bad if it causes, more increased unhappiness among the large, among the maximum number of people or whatever. And that's really not how Buddhism works. That's not how Buddhist ethics works. Just the awareness that you have caused suffering can in itself cause you to have bad karma through regret or remorse or that sort of thing. But it's not so much the action that you did, it's subsequent actions after you realize that the action that you did caused so much suffering or whatever. So yeah, let's see here. I'll read the question over just to make sure I answered it. See, also in response to the idea that you have good intentions but do bad things, it's not a problem if you had some hypothetical Mao-like dictator who actually had good intentions but still killed millions of people. I really can't believe no bad karma is created by that. If the intentions are truly good, then it is the utopian delusional ideology he presumably believes in which is generating the bad karma, I assume is created by killing millions of people for the greater good. Yeah, I mean, certainly if the people died because he was delusional in believing that the system was going to work when it didn't, then yeah, that could definitely be a factor. But just, millions of people dying doesn't necessarily create any karma. I mean, it's like a volcano blows up and kills a million people. I mean, the volcano has made no karma. It's just ethically neutral. And so, like an honest mistake where you just assume things are going to work, and then for some reason, let's say you've got this agricultural reform, right? So you got the Mao-like dictator. He starts this agricultural reform, and then just beyond his control, there's like freak bad weather that just messes everything up, and you've got droughts and famines and stuff, and then millions of people die. Well, still, I mean, he hasn't really done anything wrong until he starts feeling the guilt and remorse and so forth. And from the Buddhist point of view, guilt and remorse are bad karma. Whenever you feel remorse or regret, then you are creating bad karma for yourself. So, still, I'm kind of sticking to my guns on this one. Although what Yuichiro says, I mean, if delusion has caused you to make a bad decision, then yeah, I suppose the delusion can be responsible for some bad karma, which will then result in more suffering for yourself. But again, if you're sincerely trying to do good, you are creating good karma or good karma. That really, the actual results are largely irrelevant to Buddhist ethics. It's the mental states going through the mind of the person who is the agent, who is performing the action, that determines the ethical quality of the action. So, next question is from Seeker Celt. I assume you spell C-E-L-T as Celt. So, Seeker Celt says, if you create an identity, you create dis-ease. Well, that's an easy one. The answer is yes. In fact, I'm not sure that I should even elaborate on that. If you create an identity, I mean, you can create some ease too, but yeah, identities are, they're trouble. It's like the ego. It's based on delusion. And anything based on delusion is going to create a fair amount of unease or dis-ease. So I'll just move on to the next question from Seeker Celt. What is emancipation? And that's sort of a surprisingly bad, or it's a difficult question to answer. It's not a bad question. It's a good question. It's just that it's very difficult to answer it because there's so many ways of answering. What is emancipation? You could say it's freedom from greed, hate, and delusion, or it's freedom from the belief I am. Freedom from self view or identity or ego. Emancipation, mainly from unease. Emancipation from the creation of karma, because a fully enlightened or emancipated being is not creating karma anymore. But ultimately, emancipation is just off the scale. It's just beyond words. So there really is no completely correct, valid answer to what is emancipation. It's nirvana, full enlightenment. So I think I'll move on to the next question, which is from Potila. And Potila says maybe Panyo can give some teachings on the vital importance of dana to help educate those new to Dhamma. And this was part of a long back and forth on the Discord server in the Q&A room about what to do about the fact that Buddhism in the West doesn't receive a whole lot of support, especially Orthodox monastic Buddhism, like what should I say, non-degenerate Buddhism or non-mutated Buddhism or mutated as little as possible Buddhism. Monks, Theravada Buddhist monks and nuns who are practicing conscientiously and strictly the rules of monastic discipline aren't even allowed to handle money. They're not allowed to have their own money. They're not allowed to spend money. They're not even allowed to feed themselves. Monks especially are not allowed to cook their own food. If a monk wants to eat something on one day, somebody has to give it to him that same morning without him asking for it. And it's really difficult because Theravada Buddhism is based on ancient Indian culture, and that sort of thing was just, a lot of people knew about that. Maybe most people knew about that in ancient India, in the Ganges Valley of 6th century BC or 5th century BC. But in America, people are clueless, including really sincere Western Buddhists. They just don't realize that a monk isn't even allowed to feed himself. He's not allowed to use money at all. And so if you want to have Buddhism in the West, you have to support it. And that's one reason why I'm not a monk anymore. I got tired of living in Buddhist Asia, come back to America, and the culture is so different here from the culture of the Pali texts, where the rules of monastic discipline are, that really it was just, that's one of the reasons why I'm not a monk right now. Not the only reason, but I'm fairly skeptical of just how well like real Orthodox Theravada can fit in the West. And it may be the best thing for a really devout Theravada Buddhist in the West to do is move to Buddhist Asia. Move to Thailand or Sri Lanka or Burma, if possible. And then you can live a Buddhist lifestyle. And especially if you're going to become a monk, I would definitely advise anyone wanting to become a monk to go to Buddhist Asia and be one there, because you're not going to be able to live according to the texts in the West. Maybe if you're really sensitive and wise, you can get the gist of it without the details. But it's just a good idea to go to Buddhist Asia and live as a monk, just the way, fairly close to the way the ancient monks in the Buddhist time lived. Just wandering around, sleeping under trees, that kind of a thing. But getting back to the importance of dana to help support Dhamma and Buddhism in the West, that is a tough one, and we've been wrangling over that for quite a while. There's been all these different ideas, and none of them really have worked very well. I mean, the Goenka method is like a mutated, simplified, stripped down version of Buddhism, which has prospered, mainly because people are getting real benefit from it, and they are willing to pay for that. Most Westerners, like I say, they're stuck in a kind of utilitarian Western materialistic ethic, and they really don't see much point in generosity for generosity's sake. They don't have much belief in karma, and so they just kind of don't see the point of supporting monks. They don't see it as helping to raise the level of consciousness in the world. They don't really see it as helping others to become enlightened, even though they're not in a position to really strive for it. And so it would take a kind of re-education of Western Buddhists to get them more in tune with like an ancient Indian Buddhist ethic, and just maybe just reading the texts, and especially texts that emphasize the value of generosity and supporting monks. But personally, I think one of the best ways of managing this is to have monks in the West live as close as they can to monks in ancient India, where they're just easy to support. They're living a very stripped down ascetic lifestyle. Like the Pali, one of the Pali texts that is the most well known is the Metta Sutta. Lots and lots of people in Burma know the Metta Sutta by heart. Probably most monks can chant the Metta Sutta. And one of the things the Metta Sutta says is that a monk should be subaro, which means easy to support. And so a monk shouldn't have lots of expenses. He shouldn't be a hypochondriac wanting to go to a doctor all the time. He shouldn't need all these electronic gadgets. He doesn't need, like the phone and all that. He should really just live a stripped down ascetic existence, similar to the ones in ancient India. Like ancient Indian monks had the 8 requisites, or technically it was there was like a ninth unofficial one, that all they were supposed to own is, let's see, 3 robes, a belt, a bowl, a water filter, a needle, and a razor. And then the unofficial ninth requisite is a sitting cloth. And if monks could just live that simply, the way they're supposed to, the way they are exhorted to live in the texts, it would be a lot easier to support them. And people would be so blown away by how serious they were that they'd probably get more support. And that kind of leads to the whole issue of karma, where if the monk has the karma to be supported, he's practiced in such a way in his life that he's got the karma of receiving generosity. Maybe he was very generous before he was a monk. Then yeah, it's going to work out. But still, it is kind of a dilemma for Western Buddhism that monks really don't get much support, and they usually have to break the rules and start handling money, and furthermore, they're not much inclined to live just a radically ascetic lifestyle. And really, in some ways, it's just illegal to live a radically ascetic lifestyle in the West. I mean, you can't really live in a hut. I mean, there's homeless people in homeless encampments living like that, but legally, if you're living in a structure, it has to be up to code. It has to have electrical outlets every X number of feet, and like a fire exit and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, just living in a hut in accordance with the rules of monastic discipline, even that is essentially illegal in America, or probably most Western countries. So yeah, that's the whole issue of how to support Buddhism is just a conundrum, and we can just chew on it later, I suppose. If anyone has any good ideas, you're welcome to leave it in the comments. So, next question from Potila. In your talks on Kama, you mentioned that Chetana is will or intention, is what drives Kama. According to Orthodox Theravada, what else forms karma or Kama? Looking at your snake example, it seems that you state that the act of permitting the snake to kill has no Kama weight, that only the intention carries the development of Kama, letting the snake eat. Can you expand on this? It seems that anyone could kill or harm others as long as they had a frame of mind they were helping them, like the example of Mao. Or say a nurse who is killing terminally sick people because she doesn't want to see them suffer. Maybe she is motivated by intense compassion and pity, but she is still killing. Or maybe she is withholding food or medicine for a less direct approach. If it is only chetana that matters to create karma, you could justify some very sociopathic behaviors. Well, according to the suttas, chetana doesn't create karma. Chetana is karma. That they are identical. So, let's see. Yeah, it's chetana isn't what drives karma. Chetana is karma. So, again, we're back at Mao, or people trying to do good and failing. And like, let's say you've got a mercy killing, you've got the euthanasia, then they're probably, very probably, going to get some bad karma from the killing, but they're also going to get some good karma from the compassion. And that's the way Buddhist ethics works. I mean, there's very, very little that is black and white. It's all black or all white. It just doesn't work that way. Buddhist ethics in reality are shades of gray, because even if you believe that you are doing something, then that in itself is bad karma, because that has delusion involved, because ultimately we as individuals do not exist. So, um, the nurse who is killing terminally sick people because she doesn't want to see them suffer, yeah, I mean, she's going to get some bad karma and also some good karma. The bad karma from the actual killing, and the good karma from the compassion and not wanting them to suffer and so forth. And it would depend on her mental states and her chetana which predominates, whether it's more good than bad or more bad than good. I think a lot of Buddhists would say it's just definitely going to necessarily be more bad than good, because killing is killing. But yeah, I'm not an Orthodox Buddhist. And we could go back to a more obvious example of the doctor or the guy in the Stephen King novel who are like operating on someone. It's like somebody's badly injured or whatever, and you're doing what you can to save them and you fail. Then, or you might even know that the chances are 90% chance that the operation is going to kill them, but if you don't do the operation, the chances are more like 100% that they're going to die. So you do the operation and they die in accordance with the odds anyway, then you've still done something more good than bad, even though you exercise some ineptitude in trying to save them. So again, most of the bad karma from that sort of thing comes from the knowledge that you did bad, or not even that you did bad, but that you messed up, you failed to do what you were wanting to do, you caused death or whatever, and then the remorse, and you're just haunted by it, and that haunting and that regret and so forth is really what causes the bad karma, more than the well-intentioned mistake. So, if you really want to know more about karma from the point of view of Orthodox Theravada, um, Abhidhamma, the Abhidhamma philosophy, doesn't say that chetana and karma are purely synonymous. The suttas say that chetana is karma, or karma is chetana, and chetana here being like will. Usually it's translated as volition, but it comes close to like Schopenhauer's will. It's like the driving force of just becoming in this world. Um, I forgot where I was going with that. Let's see. Oh yeah, Abhidhamma will say that there are other factors, but even so, even according to Abhidhamma and the commentarial tradition, karma is mainly, predominantly chetana, or will, or volition, intention. But yeah, you could look up what some of the additional factors are in Theravada. But still, I mean, people in the West, we've just been born and raised into a kind of utilitarian ethic, and it's counterintuitive to go with a more subjective ethic of Buddhism. So I'll move on to the next question. This is the last question from Potila. Why do you think some forms of Buddhism are popular with certain groups of people and not others? For example, Nichiren Buddhism, like Soka Gakkai International, seems to have many more black followers than does Zen. Tibetan Buddhism has many Latino Hispanic students than Jews. Zen seems to pull a certain spectrum of Jews and whites who are well-to-do types to its doors, etc. Is this due to past karma to be attracted as a group to certain traditions? In the USA, some of these groups desperately want blacks and Hispanics to join them, but they don't seem to gain much traction despite their best efforts. Well, I think what I'm going to say is very politically incorrect, but different ethnicities differ from each other. You know, different ethnicities, they differ not only physically but also psychologically to some degree. Maybe some ethnicities are just more cold-blooded and intellectual, and they're more attracted to something like Zen or Theravada. Other people who are less detached from, um, you know, worldliness, or they're more maybe emotionally oriented or something, they might be more interested in more devotional forms of Buddhism. Or I guess Soka Gakkai, I'm not exactly sure what it's about. There are some kinds of Buddhism that are still very sort of samsara or world oriented. So people or groups of people that are world oriented might be more attracted to that. With regard to Tibetan Buddhism attracting more Hispanic people than Jews, I'm not sure that that's exactly true. My good friend Brian Rue, yeah, he definitely thinks that Tibetan Buddhism is pretty much run by Jews in the West. But that's neither here nor there. So yeah, I would just say the easy answer to that is just different ethnicities tend statistically to have different psychological traits, different motives, different, um, I don't know, different goals to some degree. I mean, it can be subtle, and it's not going to be just radical differences, but subtle enough that it becomes apparent at like a large, sort of a large scale. So yeah, I just assume that would be it. That different kinds of Buddhism have different approaches, and there different kinds of people will favor the forms of Buddhism that are more in accordance with just their own approach to existence. Um, yeah, I don't think there's any deliberate conspiracies or any such thing. With regard to a lot of the elite Buddhist groups trying to attract black people and Hispanic people into their ranks, and not doing very well. I mean, they're mostly like Starbucks liberals, like neo Marxists or something, and just their whole approach to life is radically different from most of the people that they're trying to attract for the sake of diversity, so that they won't be so embarrassed about being a white elitist movement. But I think I've kind of answered that question. So I'll just move on to the next one from Nardi. And Nardi says, this is kind of a strange question. Nardi says, can you do a list of reasons why not to ordain as a monk? See, I have just one in mind right now. My case, a very, very sexual nature. Okay. Well, I mean, I could come up with a list of why not to become a monk, but it wouldn't be a very long list. The first reason not to become a monk is if you just don't have a spiritual vocation, if you do not have a calling to it. If you're not really committed to becoming enlightened in this very life, or at least making as much progress in that direction as possible, then yeah, you're probably better off not becoming a monk. And it's better for the Sangha also that you not become a monk. And that's kind of the way it is in Asia, where most of the people who are ordained there really do not have a spiritual calling. They're not really trying to become enlightened. They're not even so much trying to cultivate wisdom. They just want to live an easy life, or they're too lazy and ugly to get a wife and a job, and so they just go to the monastery, or they're sent there as children and they just don't know what else to do in life, or they want the free education at a monastic school, or they just want upward social mobility and people worshiping them, or whatever. And the number of Asian monks who really have a spiritual calling is pretty small. It's probably well below 20%. A lot of the women who become nuns, they're just not attractive enough to attract a husband, and so they make the best of it by devoting their life to religion. So that would be the main reason. If you just do not have a genuine spiritual vocation, you should not be ordained. Um, another another one is if the life of a monk just does not suit your temperament. Like if you're very gregarious, or like you're just a horny person, or you mean you just cannot tolerate one meal a day and minimum sleep and hours of meditation or whatever, then um, yeah, in fact, I used to say that was the best reason to become a monk wasn't so much the desire to become enlightened as just the life of a monk is just in harmony with your temperament or your personality. So those would be the two main reasons why you shouldn't become a monk. One other reason would be just if you're disqualified for whatever reason. Um, you have some kind of like you've been accidentally castrated or something, you can't become a monk, or certain diseases that like I think even asthma. I think someone with asthma is not supposed to become a monk. Um, yeah, so I mean there are some um, like physical conditions and so forth, or if let's say um, you still have obligations to like government service. Let's say you're in the military reserves or something, then you're forbidden to become a monk, something like that. But with regard to personal ethical reasons, I think the first two, if you don't have a spiritual calling and the monk's life just is not compatible with your personality or temperament, those would be the two main ones. So I'll just move on to the next question from Nardi. And Nardi says, have you ever thought about speaking about different Buddhist traditions and how a Theravadan like you would react to them? Like, for example, your idea on Mahamudra and that particular lineage. I see you as an open minded man who could do that for the benefit of many Buddhists from different lineages. May you have a great day and thank you for your service to us. Well, you're welcome. And the main reason why I don't talk much about other traditions is that I just haven't studied other traditions. I've immersed myself in Theravada mainly because I wanted to know what the Buddha originally taught, and Theravada comes closest to that in most respects. It's the most conservative, it's the one school of Buddhism still in existence that is primarily based on ancient Indian culture. And so that was really what interested me. I wasn't so much interested in Theravada. I just wanted to know what the Buddha really taught. I mean, if you're going to be a Buddhist, you want to follow the teachings of Buddha, and so you have to try to find out what he taught. And I started with Theravada because that came the closest to begin with, and then went from there. So I really don't know much about Tibetan Buddhism at all. I do know some about Zen. I was interested in Zen to begin with, but like Mahamudra, I'm not even sure what that is. So that's the main reason why I don't do a lot of comparison and contrast of different schools of Buddhism, because the one I'm mainly familiar with is Theravada, and I know very very little about Tibetan and like Vajrayana and tantric stuff. Like what is a green Tara empowerment? I'm really not sure. Uh, let's see. So yeah, I guess I answered that question. And so the last question from Nardi is pure or total mindfulness enough to get you enlightened? And technically no, because I mean that's your best bet, but there's no guarantees because you can't make yourself be enlightened. You're not, no amount of effort is going to make you be enlightened. You can't force yourself to be enlightened. Like Krishnamurti used to say, you can open the window, but you can't make the breeze blow in. The best you can do is have the window open, and then maybe the breeze will blow in, but you can't make it blow in. But just setting that aside, let's say you want to maximize your chances of becoming enlightened, then yeah, um, pure, pure, purification of mindfulness is about your best bet. But um, to purify mindfulness takes a lot of other things for you to do. Like the Theravada Buddhist text will say you can't purify your mind unless you purify your morality first. You can't purify your wisdom without purifying your morality. You know, Sila, Samadhi, and Panya, it's like a progression in Orthodox Theravada. First is morality, then concentration, and then you have liberating wisdom. So there's all these different factors, all these different things. It's the Noble Eightfold Path. There's the right action and right speech and right livelihood and right thought and right effort and all these things. But you can say that they all culminate in the purification of mindfulness, which is fourth jhana. But you don't necessarily have to attain fourth jhana in order to become enlightened. But some people need purer mindfulness as a kind of jumping off point than others. So, I mean, in a way, yes, and in a way, no. Total mindfulness is enough to get enlightened. Like in the Satipatthana Sutta, or the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, the Buddha says that if you can be totally mindful for a week straight, you're guaranteed of either becoming enlightenment or becoming a non-returner. So that's a pretty strong statement to make. And so I'll move on to the next question from Mirror of Emptiness. And this is kind of a strange question. What role do the imaginary superstructures great artists like J.R.R. Tolkien build, or religious superstructure used by devout practitioners like in Tibetan Buddhism or Catholicism play in their journey into the hereafter? Well, I assume like mythological superstructures like Tibetan Buddhism. I mean, everybody has to have some kind of content of their mind and structures to their mind. I don't know whether Mirror of Emptiness here is specifically interested in like Jungian archetypes of the collective subconscious or anything like that. But you're gonna have, your mind is like a vehicle you use for moving forwards through samsara towards enlightenment. If that is your goal, then yeah, I mean, it's just gonna have like this. Any vehicle has to have a structure. So, I mean, if you're in a culture or in a religious system that has this elaborate mythology, that's just going to be part of the system, and just part of your mind. Part of your approach to enlightenment. Early Buddhism tried to strip that down to a minimum. You weren't supposed to believe anything really. So the more of the content there's going to be, the more you're going to have to be careful about detaching from it. But it does seem that there have been enlightened beings that really still they still endorse the mythology of their culture. The Buddha didn't completely reject or denounce ancient Indian mythology or cosmology. I think Saint John of the Cross may have been an arahant. He was a very, very advanced jhana master, very wise person. He was, despite being a 16th century Spanish Catholic and being very devoted to the Virgin Mary, he read the Bible and all that and believed it. But so long as you're detached from it, I mean, there's just the content of your mind becomes irrelevant. And so just about any kind of superstructure, so long as it's not serving to be just a flat out hindrance to wisdom. If you're believing that you're getting merit by killing some kind of animals or even other humans, then yeah, that could be definitely a hindrance, moving you in the wrong direction. But I mean, if it's a relatively benign mythology, it's endorsing, immorality or that sort of thing, then yeah, I mean, it's just something that is part of the clutter that you eventually have to detach from. And I hope Mirror of Emptiness wasn't specifically referring to like Jungian archetypes, because I wouldn't know how to answer that one. And so I'll just move on to the next question from Chakra Gosha, the voice of chakra. And Chakra Gosha here says, in the Buddhist time, were married men or fathers of children allowed to become monks? Notably, the Buddha himself left his family, including a young son, but naturally that was before the regular rules of ordination were established. Well, I like getting easy questions sometimes, and this is a fairly easy one. And the answer is yeah. I mean, you can be married and be the father of children and still become a monk. The closest thing to that is supposed to be a hindrance would be you have to have the consent of your parents to be ordained. That even at the ordination ceremony, I think if I remember correctly, you're asked if your parents consent. You can be ordained without the consent of your parents, but it's against the rules. And even though the ordination is still valid, the monks who conduct the ordination commit a minor offense by doing it. But yeah, there's even some pretty gnarly stories that are supposed to be praising monks. But there was this monk who had a wife and a baby, and he just renounced the world and became a monk. And so he's sitting under a tree at some park, and his wife with the baby like hunts him down, and she just puts the baby down in front of him and says, "This is your child, you take care of it." And then she walks away, but of course she just kind of hides in a distance to see what he's going to do. And he just, in a state of complete equanimity, just in a state of meditative bliss, he just keeps meditating and ignores the baby in front of him until finally, after a while, the wife just comes back and picks up the baby and leaves, because she realizes he's just in a state of complete detachment even from his own baby. So, I mean, that's pretty monstrous from most people's point of view, but in the commentaries, I think it's in the commentaries where the story is found, it was praising the monk and his detachment and all that. So it did happen. And yeah, the Buddha himself left his wife and his baby son and his harem of slave girls, I assume. But they were rich. I mean, his wife and son didn't experience any dire hardship because he wasn't supporting them, because they were, according to the legend, a princess and a prince, or the son of a prince. So yeah, I mean, that was not an obstacle, or it wasn't against the rules to be ordained as a monk, even if you were married and had children. So I'll just move on to the next question from BPAT427. And BPAT here asked me some kind of personal questions. He's not so much interested in Buddhist philosophy here. His first question is, what music have you been listening to lately? And to tell you the truth, I haven't been listening to music very much at all. Yeah, there was maybe a week or so ago, I just felt in the mood to listen to music, and I was mostly listening to the old stuff that I used to like before I was a monk, like Led Zeppelin or Talking Heads. Brian Eno and David Byrne's My Life in the Bush of Ghosts has always been one of my favorite albums. I watch every once in a while. I'll watch an episode of this. It's called Cowboy Bebop, and I like the intro music to that. But yeah, for the past couple of years at least, I really have not been feeling strong urges to listen to music. Because I'm called John at work. The boss sometimes will be singing Big Bad John, some old song. I think it's from like the 50s. So I listened to that a few weeks ago. But yeah, I'm not really much into listening to music lately. So next question from BPAT427. What food have you been eating, enjoying the most since rejoining lay life? Well, I was just thinking to myself the other day that my favorite food in the whole world is probably butter pecan ice cream. And I've been eating quite a lot of that from time to time. although I don't have any at present, which is not optimal. Um, my girlfriend's a really good cook, so just about anything she cooks is really enjoyable. And just eating with someone you love is very nice. It makes the food better. But yeah, yeah. So I guess that's it. I've ate some bacon pizza the other day. That was interesting. Okay, so let's move on. BPAP427's next question. Have you gotten a cell phone yet? If so, what kind? So yeah, I got a cell phone. See, it's right here. And it's like a Samsung Galaxy A12 or something. It's like the second cheapest kind. Because really, I don't need lots of gadgets. I don't use lots of apps. I just want something that'll tell the time and be used as a phone. And I can use it as an alarm clock. And I don't know. It's not that big of a deal. I usually don't even take my phone with me if I go out. If I go to work, I do. But aside from that, it's just, I don't know. It's not really important. But I got it almost immediately after dropping out of the monkhood and coming here to South Carolina. Because I had to get internet access, and usually you get like the package of internet and phone and TV and that kind of thing. But I despise television, so I just got the phone and the internet. So the next question from BPAT427. Have you seen or spoken to any of your family members since disrobing? Have you met any of your girlfriend's family yet? If so, how did the interactions go? Also, you've previously mentioned that you knew your lady before you were born. Ah, could you elaborate on that, or is it too personal, conventionally inexplicable? Okay, well, let's just go to the first part of the question here. Have I seen or spoken to any of my family members since disrobing? Um, I've spoken to my brother. So, yeah. So the answer to that would be yes. Also, I have a niece that I didn't even know existed until just a few years ago who occasionally contacts me through email. And those would be the only two family members that I have communicated with over the past year. Now my parents are both dead, and I really did not come from a close family, so um, most of my relatives were on the East Coast, and for most of my life in America, I was living on the West Coast, and really didn't even. I mean, I have to like sit there and calculate how many aunts and uncles I had, and I'm not sure how many cousins I have. So I just do not come from a very close family. Neither of my parents were very close with their respective families. So, yeah. So I'll just move on to the next part of this question, which is, have you met any of your girlfriend's family yet? Yeah, I met her mom, and she likes me. Yeah, so that's nice. In fact, she for Christmas she got me these new glasses. So that's nice. Um, Also, you previously mentioned that you knew your lady before you were born. Could you elaborate on that, or is it too personal, conventionally inexplicable? Yeah, I think it might be too conventionally inexplicable, but there's definitely a very deep connection where we're just having the same thoughts simultaneously and that kind of a thing. Um, just like even when I was in California, I could tell whether she was in a good mood or not just from how I felt when I woke up that morning. Just because we're have like this connection where her mood would influence mine and vice versa. We were just kind of like on the same wavelength, and just it's just like a karmic thing from a Buddhist point of view. So yeah. Also, I mean, I have these ideas about maybe where we met in the past, like maybe 14th century England or something. But there was like a class barrier between us at the time. She was too high class for me. So finally, we've got three questions from Chaplin. And Chaplin's first question is, can you explain contemplation in the ancient sense and also the Buddhist sense? Well, this is kind of a tough question because contemplation, it can have different meanings. Like with regard to Buddhism, On the one hand, you can have, a monk contemplating death or contemplating the qualities of the Buddha or that sort of thing. Or also, you have what, like the Catholics call contemplation, which would be at least second jhana. So, from the Christian point of view, contemplation is one step above meditation. Meditation is you're still thinking, but when you stop thinking, then it's called contemplation. You're just sitting there, just wide open and crystal clear. So, can I explain contemplation in the ancient sense and also the Buddhist sense? Um, yeah, it's hard to say because, especially in Buddhism, I mean, it's not based on the English language; it's based on Pali and how what you would translate from Pali into the word contemplation is is uncertain. So when I'm talking about Buddhist contemplation, it's pretty much the way I just explained it. I mean, you can have like the intellectual, just reflecting upon death or reflecting upon, impermanence or reflecting upon the qualities of the Buddha or that sort of thing. Or then if you're really practicing contemplation in the Catholic sense, then you got at least second jhana going. And yeah, so rather than explaining it in the ancient sense and also the Buddhist sense, I'm more or less explaining it in the Catholic sense and also the Buddhist sense. So I hope I answered that one more or less well enough. And so I'll move on to the second question. What are the main differences between Buddhism and New Age, where New Age contradicts Buddhism? Ooh, that's kind of a, I mean, that could be a very long answer because there's lots of differences. Um, New Age is more based on Hinduism than Buddhism, and it's just wide open. I mean, it's sort of like Hinduism where you can have all kinds of beliefs and all kinds of practices included under New Age, and most of it's very different from Buddhism. I assume the similarities is I assume New Age and Buddhism both agree that there is like karma, that there is rebirth. I assume New Age people believe in reincarnation. I'm pretty sure they do. Um, Emphasis on nonviolence, um, but just about everything else is just really different. Like New Age is, it's a very faith oriented system in that in Buddhism they talk about there are the two faculties of faith and reason, and they should be in balance. You got too much faith and not enough reason, you can believe anything no matter how silly it is. If you've got too much reason and not enough faith, nobody can tell you anything because you're just too skeptical. And New Age is just way like this in the faith because I mean New Age people can believe damn near anything. It's like healing crystals and alkaline cleanses and the virtues of acai berries and what else? The Archangel Metatron and channeling and tarot cards and astrology and just about anything. It's sort of like classical paganism, where it's just this hodgepodge of all these different beliefs, where Buddhism, especially Theravada Buddhism, is much more systematic and organized and clear cut. Um, and I think New Age, the ethics of New Age are different from the ethics of Buddhism. Whereas the ethics of New Age are sort of like Western liberal ethics, where so long as you're not actually hurting somebody, then you're still doing okay. But like stuff like sex is just irrelevant to morality for New Age. Whereas in Buddhism, sensual pleasures should be practiced in moderation, and especially something like sex. So those would be some of the main differences, I think. But it's really a broad uh, answer to a broad question because New Age really is just all over the place. At least my experience of dealing with New Age people, where Buddhism is more intellectual and hard-headed and precise, more scientific. So I'll just move on to the very last question, not only from Chaplin but from everybody, and that is, what is a good movie that portrays Dharma and healthy male role models? And I was thinking about this. It's I can't think of a really good Buddhist movie. Um, But one movie that really comes to mind is Fearless. And I think it was made in the 1990s. I think Jeff Bridges is the star of it. And it's a good Dharma movie. It's got a lot of wisdom to it, I think. It's about this guy who he's afraid of flying, but he has to fly on a business trip or something, and the plane starts having like serious problems. You know, the plane is going out of control, and he sees this little boy sitting ahead of him, um, who's obviously scared to death. So he just goes up and sits next to the little boy to kind of comfort him. And then it turns out that the plane crashes and almost everybody dies except him and this little boy and a few other people. If he hadn't moved to sit with the little boy, he would have died also because the guy he was sitting next to died. And before the plane crashes, this peace comes over him, and he has like a near death experience, like a lot of like somebody like Eckhart Tolle or who's that scientist guy? I can't remember now. Bad with names sometimes, but he has a near death experience, and he just becomes fearless. He just becomes almost, he's just functioning in a higher level of consciousness, and he starts having real problems with the people around him. Like, um, he's this lawyer keeps pestering him because it's like he was sitting next to a friend of his before he moved to sit next to the little boy, and I think the wife of the guy of his friend is trying to sue the airlines, and so the lawyer and other people, I think the wife also, the widowed wife, are like urging him to say how terrified he was and how messed up he was and everything, essentially to lie, and he just doesn't want to do it, and he just it's he starts having problems with his own wife and so forth because of his detachment. You know, he doesn't have the same attitude as he had before, and finally, it's just like the pressure of samsara starts pulling him back down again. So it's got a lot of good dharma to it, and I assume it's got healthy male role models also. Um, but I can't really think of a perfect example, but that's the one that immediately comes to mind. And so that's the last question, and I guess I'm done. And if you have any more questions, which I would be happy to attempt to answer, feel free to leave them in the comments below, or if you are subscribed on Subscribestar, leave them there under the next announcement, or if you're on the Discord server, leave them in the question and answer room. And be happy.